Hi there, hope you're doing well. Yeah, I watched a bit of a Candace Owen video last night, and I've been watching her videos pretty regularly for the last several months, really, since poor Charlie Kirk was murdered. And I've been watching all her videos, and it had seemed to me, and it may still be the case, that she's genuinely wanting to find out the truth of what happened, because the story that the FBI and the official story that the FBI expects people to believe, just it doesn't add up at all, really, in terms of the young man that they're accusing of doing it, or doing it alone, or whatever, for so many different reasons. And that just seems a complete construction, totally unbelievable. And it's all kind of it's laid out for you bit by bit through Candace Owens's videos. But it never felt right anyway. In other words, he's a sort of a patsy figure, or whatever you want to call it, just somebody who's being blamed for it, like Lee Harvey Oswald was in terms of JFK. But I started watching this Candace Owen video last night, her regular show, and she starts off saying, doing this big advert for this next interview she's got, and she's interviewing Hunter Biden, like it's a coup, like it's something great, we're meant to go. A lot of people in the comments were going, "Oh, that's brilliant! I'm looking forward to that." Yeah, I mean, this is someone that was so involved in what was going on in Ukraine and milking it and making huge amounts of money, 10% for the big guy, and then there's all this, the laptop, if it was all true, and dodgy stuff on there, and potentially illegal stuff on there, and it's just weird to me that she's segueing from ostensibly investigating her friends. They were friends, Candace Owen and Charlie Kirk. Some of you may not know, but they both worked for. They were very close anyway, and they kind of worked together for TPUSA, Turning Point USA, and I don't know, this segueing to this move to, like, oh no, now I'm gonna, in the midst of doing all this stuff about how Charlie Kirk's widow is behaving, and all these strange things happening around the investigation, and it's just not believable what they're saying about the person who's been accused from so many different angles, and then just going to, and now I've pulled off this coup, I've pulled off this thing that everyone's going to love, or whatever. I'm going to be interviewing Hunter Biden, and you see a clip, you see a taster of the interview. Hunter Biden's going, "Yeah, my dad, he was never part of the elite. My dad, that's the thing about my dad. He was they didn't like him because he was never part of the elite," and it's just all rubbish. It's all rubbish straight away. I don't know. Maybe she challenges him on that. She didn't in the clip, but maybe she does in the interview. And people might say, well, people should interview whoever they want, and of course that's true. That's right. But it just feels very felt. I'm just out. I don't want to watch her show anymore, and not that makes a difference to her or anyone. She gets millions and millions of viewers, and that leads me on to another point, which is, does something have to be amiss if you've got a huge platform on something like YouTube or on X? Maybe it's cynical to say that it has to be like that, because thinking of another person that's well known, Russell Brand, he's due to be in court in October, I think, in the UK. I think he lives in. Does he live in America? I think he lives in America, doesn't he? But I think he does. But he has to be in court in the UK in October. But he's got, was it 6 or 7 million on YouTube? So those things don't sort of add together. If they're after him, in other ways, why is he being allowed this huge platform type of idea? So maybe it doesn't apply across the board, this idea. I just think that it's not an original statement. Lots of people have said this, that if you've got a platform as a so-called alternative speaker, alternative reporter, alternative journalist, and you've got millions and millions and millions of followers and views, tens, hundreds of millions of views, is there necessarily a question mark around that? In other words, would you be allowed to have such a huge platform? And are you more complicated than you might appear to be? And there's this idea that, I can't remember his name now, but he was like a high up Mason, one of the Masons, had a big old beard and everything, Freemasons, and said, when the public need leaders, we will supply them, And I was watching Doubleday News today as well, with a guy, a commentator, I think he's a rapper, but also a journalist, called Loki, and I've watched quite a few on Doubleday News in the last bit of time. He's talking about Tommy Robinson and how the EDL began, and how they were funded, and where all the funding was coming from, and it's all coming from a certain place and certain sources. So it's the kind of the foundational stories we can believe that we know about individuals or organizations or whatever. It's not about approving or not approving them. It's just whether you think you know who they are or what they are, is what I'm getting at. And it can be completely, you can be completely blindsided, and it's actually being funded but from a group over here for other reasons, for very particular reasons to do with their benefits. And that's how it's managed to gain traction. And how an individual has managed to gain traction, they have to be, to some degree or other, championed by people who have the financial resources to do it, and a political or ideological drive to do it, some agenda at work there. And it's the idea that people come out of nowhere and just sort of like, I'm not saying it's impossible, but I think in this day and age, where so much is sewn up, and you have to wonder if people represent themselves as the alternative to mainstream, alternative, and then they get really, really big and really apparently big, then you just have to wonder, don't you? I don't know. I don't want to be thinking that about everybody, or I suppose you just make a decision on a case-by-case basis. And for me, it was that, it's not that, yeah, of course she's free to interview Hunter Biden and Candace Owens. Of course, it's up to her, isn't it? And people want to enjoy, if they enjoy that kind of thing, they want to watch it. Great. It just feels grubby and weird to me. It just seems really strange, because watching her videos for months and months now, it's all been on this kind of serious tack of trying to find out who murdered her friend, Charlie Kirk. And then you just, I don't know, it's just like it's a dodgy note. It's like the note goes weird notes, you're playing something in C major, and then there's suddenly an E flat there, whatever. It's just pulled it off the top of my head, but you know what I mean. It just sounds weird to me, anyway. But there's always lots of money involved, and I'm not saying there shouldn't be any money involved. I'm not making a comment about that, but in these cases where people, obviously there is lots of money involved. I mean, a lot as well, not small amounts, not. And then there's just these wheels within wheels, and why people do things, and you don't always know. And it might be that she's, I don't know. In light of that, I've started watching today this really amazing film it's called Executive Action, from 1973, with Burt Lancaster and a bunch of other actors. I can't remember the other actors' names at the moment. I'll look them up on IMDb, but 1973, and it's about this the conspiracy to murder JFK, and it really goes right into that. It's a deep state operation, and it's absolutely fascinating. I didn't know about this film. It was recommended on a channel I watch called Professor Hamamoto. He's a guy in America, in California. He was an academic, or is an academic. He recommended this film on his last podcast, as he was going through it. As he was going through the podcast, and he just, it's one of the things he recommended. And this film's incredible, and it's got a scene in it in which these two, Burt Lancaster, this is kind of fixer, he arranges for things like this to be done, assassinations and the like. And with all these deep state operatives and people in the oil industry and so forth, and people they've used before for other state or deep state crimes, or whatever you want to call it, or the I don't know what to call these entities anymore. You call them many things, but there's a little scene in it when this other guy was saying, we've got to keep our influence in Southeast Asia. They're talking about Vietnam and everything, and because what we want to do is we want to reduce the population of the world down to 500 million. And we've got ways of doing that, and we're going to start doing it, basically. It's a plan, it's in the works, and we're going to start doing it. And this is a film from 1973. So it's a film 10 years after the actual assassination of JFK, or murder of JFK. And they're talking about that in there as well. So none of this stuff is new. I'm not saying other people didn't know that already, that it wasn't new, but I was it threw me hearing that little scene that they were talking about there, about this population reduction. But anyway, I really recommend the film, Executive Action, and Burt Lancaster's always good. But anyway, I'll leave it there. Take care. Bye-bye.